What if a routine landing, lasting just a few seconds? A runway already known for danger, reopened just weeks earlier. Could turn into the deadliest aviation disaster in an entire continent. A modern Airbus A320 touches down smoothly, but instead of slowing, it keeps going. A runway already known for danger, reopened just weeks earlier, without critical safety upgrades. A highly experienced crew. Yet one small misstep changes everything. In less than 30 seconds, it took just 16 seconds for everything to go wrong, and 109 lives were lost forever. And what happened next would leave investigators asking one chilling question: how could something so small lead to something so catastrophic? To understand that, we need to start with the place where it all unfolded, one of the most challenging airports in the world. On July 17, 2007, TAM Airlines Flight 3054 departed from Porto Alegre, heading towards São Paulo. It was a routine domestic journey, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. On board were 181 passengers and 6 crew members, traveling aboard an Airbus A320. Less than 2 hours later, as the aircraft approached São Paulo's Congonhas airport, everything appeared normal. But within moments of landing, the situation changed completely. The aircraft overran the runway, leaving 109 people no longer alive, making it the deadliest aviation disaster in Brazilian and South American history. Now, this event was not caused by a single failure. It was the result of something far more complex, a combination of infrastructure issues, weather conditions, and human decisions. But the real story begins long before the aircraft touched the runway, with the airport itself. Picture this, an airport placed right in the heart of a massive city. Congonhas Airport in São Paulo is surrounded by buildings, roads, and constant activity. Aircraft take off and land here every 90 seconds. There is no room for delay, and more importantly, no room for mistakes. Now, here is where it gets interesting. The main runway, known as Runway 35L, is shorter than most runways used by large jets, less than 2,000 meters. At first glance, that may not seem unusual, but combine that with a slope, limited stopping space, and a busy roadway at the end of the runway, and the margin for error becomes extremely small. Pilots often compare landing here to landing on an aircraft carrier. Precision is everything. The runway itself had another problem. Just weeks before the incident, it had been resurfaced. This was meant to improve safety. However, a critical feature was missing. The surface lacked special drainage grooves, designed to channel water away during rain. Without these grooves, water could accumulate on the runway. And when that happens, something dangerous can occur: hydroplaning. That means the aircraft's wheels lose contact with the ground. And when that happens, control becomes extremely limited. Now think about this. Just one day before the incident, another aircraft had difficulty stopping on the same runway. Pilots had already reported poor braking conditions. The warning signs were there, but operations continued. And with that, the stage was already set for trouble. All it needed was the right set of conditions. So, the real question is, what happened when those conditions finally came together? Now imagine being in the cockpit. It is evening. Heavy rain is falling across São Paulo. The runway has already been temporarily closed earlier due to weather conditions, and then reopened shortly before the aircraft arrives. The crew of Flight 3054 was highly experienced. Both pilots had decades of flying experience and thousands of hours in the air. This was not an inexperienced team, but there was one important detail. One of the aircraft's thrust reversers, a system used to slow the plane after landing, was not operational. Now, this does not normally prevent a safe landing. Aircraft are designed to handle such situations, but in this case, The margin for error was already extremely small. Wet runway, short distance, limited stopping capability. As the aircraft approaches the runway, the control tower confirms the conditions. The surface is wet and slippery. At this point, the captain makes a decision. He disengages the autopilot and takes manual control. Why? Because he wants to ensure the aircraft touches down as early as possible, maximizing the available runway. Everything is focused on precision. Everything is calculated. But beneath that, there is pressure. The reputation of this runway, the weather conditions, the reduced stopping capability, all of it adds up. And sometimes, even the most experienced professionals can feel that pressure. The aircraft descends. Closer, closer, and then it touches down. At that exact moment, everything still seems under control. What happens next changes everything. What happened next shocked even experienced investigators. The aircraft touches down normally. Instead of slowing down, something is wrong. The left engine enters reverse thrust, exactly as expected. But the right engine does not. Instead of slowing the aircraft, it continues producing forward power. Now think about that for a moment. One engine is trying to slow the aircraft. The other is pushing it forward. This creates what is known as asymmetric thrust. And the effect is immediate. The aircraft begins to drift off its intended path. At the same time, another system fails to activate. The spoilers, devices that help press the aircraft onto the runway, do not deploy. Why? Because both engines were not in the correct position. And without those systems working together, the aircraft cannot slow down effectively. Everything is now happening very quickly, just 16 seconds from the moment the engines are incorrectly set to the aircraft reaching the end of the runway. Only 26 seconds in total. That is all it took. The aircraft continues forward, crosses a major road, and collides with a nearby building and fuel station. The sequence is over in moments, but the consequences are lasting. And now, investigators are left with a critical question. How could such an experienced crew make such a simple yet devastating mistake? So the real question is, was this a technical failure or something else? Investigators quickly moved to recover the aircraft's data recorders. Despite the intense conditions at the site, they were able to retrieve valuable information. And what they found was surprising. There was no major mechanical failure. The engines were functioning as designed. The aircraft systems were operating correctly. So what went wrong? The answer lies in one small but critical detail. The right thrust lever, instead of being pulled back to idle, remained in the climb position. That means one engine was still producing forward thrust. But why would that happen? This is where it gets deeper. At the time, there were two different procedures for landing with one thrust reverser. An older method and a newer updated method. The older method involved handling the thrust levers differently. Investigators believe the captain may have attempted to use this older technique, possibly because it could allow faster stopping in difficult conditions. But under pressure, something went wrong. The lever was not set correctly, and there was no warning system to alert the crew about the mismatch between the two engines. Add to that, limited visibility of lever positions in a dark cockpit, stress from runway conditions, time pressure during landing, and suddenly, a small mistake becomes a critical one. This was not just human error, it was a chain reaction where system design, environment, and human decision-making all interacted at once. Now, this analysis is based on publicly available investigation findings and is presented here purely for educational awareness. What investigators discovered next would lead to lasting changes in aviation safety. In the end, this disaster was not caused by a single factor. It was the result of a chain of events, a runway with design limitations, a resurfacing project left incomplete, challenging weather conditions, and a moment of human error under pressure. After the incident, important changes were made. Runways were upgraded with proper drainage grooves. New rules were introduced for landing in wet conditions, and procedures were clarified to reduce confusion. But the deeper lesson goes beyond aviation. Even the most advanced systems still depend on human decisions, and in high-risk environments, there is very little room for even the smallest mistake. TAM Flight 354 reminds us of something important. Sometimes, history is not shaped by large decisions, but by tiny details overlooked in critical moments. And those moments can change everything.